My family and I really can't get enough mangoes when the season rolls around. But in this video, I want to show you how other parts of the plant can be used to make natural dye. I was really fortunate to have access to a public mango tree at one of our favorite parks. And on this day, I was gathering leaves from the ground to use for experimentation. And then I came across a branch that had fallen from a tree. This is exactly what I was hoping for, so I could take it home and do what I needed to do for the process. So I'm going to be doing a few things. I'm going to be making dye by boiling leaves, making dye by boiling bark from the branch that I got, and also combining leaves and bark to make dye. So you'll see me going back and forth between different processes that I'm doing in this video. So no matter what, I'm probably always going to end up solar dyeing. I'm sure that boiling the dye and submerging the textile into the dye would suffice for achieving color, but for me, I just have to do this solar dyeing process. So I just boil the leaves and then pour it into jars. And I'm going to be attempting to see if I can make the color change based on some information I read. So in one jar, I'm going to put iron in the form of a nail. Another jar, I'm going to put potassium, aluminum sulfate. And then one jar, I'll just have the mango leaf dye. And I want to see if the color will be affected using these additions to the dye. After a day or two, I realized that the nail was not doing what I thought that it would do, what it's done for me in the past. So I actually poured in some iron water that I made about a year and a half ago just from putting nails in a jar of water. And so what you saw me pouring in there was the nail water. It's rust color and that just formed over time. This is the jar that the alum was added to, and this is the only one that I'm seeing some slight change in color. It's not that significant, but I can notice like a tinge of green in there, and I think that maybe if I had used more loom, I would have achieved something different. So I just continued to check the jars every day or so. Overall, these pieces ended up staying in these jars for a week or more, and we had varying levels or degrees of sunlight. We've been getting a lot of rain, overcast days, but we did have some sun coming through. And so I just wanted to give the pieces as much time as possible to achieve color. And now I'll begin working on the bark and slicing some pieces of that off. Although I started out using the solar dye process for this bark dye, I eventually decided to put it in a pot and boil it. The sun wasn't shining as much, and I just wanted to see if there would be some, I guess, increase in color absorption if it was boiled. So I ended up doing that. And then here what I'm doing is trying to use one hand to tear up the dried mango leaves. And I'm going to make dye using the leaves and bark this time. Now this was several days after we initially got the branch from the park. So all the leaves have dried by then, and I soaked them a bit first before boiling them along with what was left of the branch. And right here, I'm just squeezing out a t-shirt that I'm going to be dyeing with the leaf and bark dye. So I put some string around it to create a tie-dye effect and just submerged it into the pot with the plant material. So because I wanted to try to get color into this t-shirt as soon as possible so I could get this video done and uploaded, I ended up doing a few different things. I took the entire pot out into the sun and just left it out there for a day. You can see me here removing the leaves and just gonna leave it out there in the sun. And then I decided, okay, let me just pour it into this glass dish. And because it's a sunny day, this should help the process and expedite color absorption. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying different things, which is typical when I'm creating plant dye and dyeing textiles. So I'm finally ready to check the dye that's been in the jars and see how the fabric looks after about a week with not a whole lot of sun, but some here and there. So you can see, despite the fact that I used a couple different mordants or additives in the jars, the color looks pretty much the same on all of these pieces. This one was the biggest transformation. This was the bark dye that I initially was going to solar dye with. Then I decided to boil it, and then I put it back into the sun in the pot with no lid and very little liquid. And this is what the sun did to that piece of fabric, which I think is very interesting. And the t-shirt I also put directly in the sun with no top, so the exposure was there. However, it didn't have the same effect on this piece, and it may have been because of the lack of sun and also more liquid in the dish than was in the pot. So that can make a difference in how those various marks and striations and patterns can get into fabric naturally when it's exposed directly to the sun. But I'm happy with the way this tie-dye turned out. It looks really nice. And of course, this is going to dry lighter than it appears in this video. This is still wet. And I'm actually going to run this through the washer in cold water. And you'll be able to see how much lighter it is after that as well. Now this is what the t-shirt looks like after it was washed for about 15 minutes in cold water in the machine with no detergent. So it's a little bit lighter now, and it will get even lighter once it dries. What I usually do when I dye a t-shirt for myself is I cut the sleeves off, and I like to wear it with some of my long skirts, or I may put it over a sleeveless dress if I want more coverage. And these are just fun to wear around the house or even out to do errands. I always enjoy these. So this was my first time using mango leaves and bark to make dye, and I enjoy the experience. I was kind of expecting to get some different colors by adding things to it, but I'll experiment with that later. Maybe I'll get some tin powder or maybe some other kind of iron powder and see what I can do. But I hope that this was helpful. Thanks so much for watching.